I got a good feeling about Sunday as the Lions take on the Commanders. Former Washington wide receiver Anthony Armstrong is going to join us. It's a Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Matt Dery with you. It is Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network on this, a Tuesday, September 13th, and a Wednesday, September 14th. As we talk Detroit Lions football with you each and every day, we thank you for making us your first listen each and every day and following us on Twitter, Facebook, and on our YouTube channel, Locked On Lions. Please subscribe on YouTube as well. Today, we are brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Coming up on the program today, Anthony Armstrong, the former Washington Redskin wide receiver, played with the likes of Donovan McNabb and Rex Grossman back in the day. Now the co-host of the Believe in Commanders podcast on the Believe Podcast Network is going to join us. We'll talk to Anthony about all things Washington. We'll still do the Thursday crossover and all that, but we want to get a little early week look into what's going on with the Commanders as they are off to a 1-0 start. Couple of things on the show. And again, follow us on Twitter at Dery Speaks and everywhere else. Lion fans, I love them. I love you guys. The panic over one loss, okay? We can point out plenty of negatives. We can point out all the things that the Lions did not do well this past Sunday. There were a lot of them. And Dan Campbell has owned it all week now, the last 2 days, saying we got things we got to clean up. I think that is apparent. I think that is known. But to sit here for some fans, oh my gosh, some of you hit me up, whether it's the comment section on YouTube or on my Facebook page or Twitter, this and Aiden Hutchinson was terrible in the first game. Yeah, well, he didn't have a good first game. But we told you before the game, with the way the Eagles were running RPO and Jalen Hurts, and it's going to be a rough, likely opener for a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. But this week, Lions off a loss, Commanders, who aren't a good team. They're not very good. They might be average. Off a win, I like the Lions' chances. And the Lions ran the football very, very well. Here's a reason I really like their chances Sunday. The Lions ran for 181 yards this past weekend. 181. DeAndre Swift had 144 of those yards. Washington played against a Jacksonville team that does not run the ball much. And yet here were the Jaguars running for 123 yards in that game last Sunday in their loss to the Commanders and averaged 7 yards per carry. DeAndre Swift should have a field day. I really believe that's going to be a big matchup and a big advantage for Detroit is running the ball this Sunday. And they're at home, and they need this thing. You do not want to be 0-2 going into Minnesota. So that is a positive. That is something I like, and that is something that I believe in. And I think the Lions have got to stick with this ground game. I understand now you've got better receivers. You got to get Hawkinson going. You know, Goff feels better than he did a year ago, the play calling with Ben Johnson. But if this football team is going to win Sunday, they've got to establish the run and stick with it. DeAndre Swift is a beast. And boy, he was good this past Sunday. So I think Detroit can run the football on this team just like Jacksonville did. And look, Jacksonville had a fourth quarter lead in that game this past Sunday in D.C. By the way, did anybody read the article and the story about the Commanders? The Commanders are owned by Dan Snyder, and I don't want to get myself in trouble, but they've been a dumpster fire organization forever. The Commanders had these mugs that they were selling with their new logo in the team shop and in this truck outside of the team shop at the stadium this past Sunday. And on this like coffee mug, it was the new emblem, this new Washington Commanders emblem they have. And behind it was the state of Washington symbol, the state of Washington logo. They don't play in the state of Washington. They actually play their games in Maryland. So like midway through the first, like an hour before the game, somebody figured out that those mugs that were wrong, nobody checked on them before they put them on the shelves. And then like an hour before the game, they were like rushing in there to grab the boxes and grab them off the shelf and be like, nope, we can't sell these. They're wrong. Duh. The Washington Redskins don't play. They're from the District of Columbia or Maryland or Virginia. They're not from Seattle, Washington, or Tacoma. Just classic Commanders. One other note before we get to Anthony Armstrong, the co-host of the Believe in Commanders podcast. But the Lions today freed up, according to Field Yates of ESPN, another $2 million in cap space. I don't know where they're going to be spending this money. I'm assuming they're looking at defensive linemen and a defensive tackle. I'm not sure if it's going to be Ndamukong Suh, but just bear with me a second here. The Lions last week restructured Taylor Decker's contract and moved his money into a signing bonus so that they could pay him up front this year, next year, and convert the salary against the cap to a bonus, which you can do. And that freed up like $4 million. Today, the Lions freed up another $2 million by converting Michael Brocker's $4 million of salary this year into, or $2 million of salary this year, but $4 million that he's owed, I believe, into $2 million for a signing bonus this year and next year. So they converted that and freed up another $2 million in cap space. So now the Lions cap space is $6.4 million for this year. Keep an eye on that. Look, you got to add players. You got to have injured players. There's all sorts of loopholes. But the Lions didn't have a ton of cap space. Remember, they're still paying the likes of like Jamie Collins and others against their cap, which killed their cap. It was bad contracts signed by Bob Quinn that were backloaded years ago. So keep that in mind. There are players that are no longer here that are still being paid by the team and that count against the cap. Not being paid by the team still, but being paid against the cap. You know what I mean? So 6.4 million, just keep an eye on that. This team needs to be adding a defensive lineman or two. I'm not sure who, but keep an eye on that for sure. All right, we're going to talk to Anthony Armstrong coming up next. First, we told you about our friends at PrizePicks, who was playing daily fantasy last night. What a game last night. What a clown show move by Nathaniel Hackett. But if you had Brandon McManus making a certain number of field goals or whatever, and you put some money down on that on PrizePicks, it was fun, right? Because you can bet on 2 to 5 players during games or spread out through other games. And if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projection at prizepicks.com, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's against the projections available. Patrick Mahomes, is he going to throw for 315? Yes, no? You can make that bet. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, everything. College basketball, WNBA, all of it. Entries can be made easily in 60 seconds or less. It is that simple. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, they'll give you $50, and so on. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 with our friends at PrizePicks. All right, our guest today on a Tuesday edition of Locked on Lions as we get ready for the Washington Commanders invasion of Ford Field. I don't know if we should say former Redskin, former Commander, former Washington football team wide receiver, but it is Anthony Armstrong, co-host of the Believe Washington Commanders podcast. And he joins me on the program today. What's up, Anthony?
What's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You are good and excited. I know you got your jersey behind us for those watching on YouTube, and your Washington football team, Commanders, whatever, off to a good start. How much fun was last Sunday?
Man, well, so I'm in Texas, so I actually didn't get to watch the game live. I had a little notification that was giving me updates on the score, so I had all of the angst and the anxiety without the actual visual evidence. But whenever I saw that they won, I finally went to go dig into Twitter, because Twitter can be a scary, scary place depending on when you jump in there. So I got the experience it without watching it. Then I went back and watched the tape, and it was a really, really good game. I'm proud of their showing.
It's interesting because there are a lot of former players from Washington that still lament the organization. They some rip Dan Snyder, some do this, some do that. How do you feel about the organization as a whole? How'd they treat you? And now that Ron Rivera is there, have they turned the corner? Are they doing things right?
Starting with the present, I would have to say the changes that they've made, with Jason Wright, Ron Rivera, get Julie Donaldson involved in some leadership positions. They've made some changes to try to right the wrongs of the past. And my path to the team, I was a guy that was just fighting, scratching, clawing to get onto the roster to make it to the field. I never had any bad experiences. So, I can't sit there and just bash the team and bash that organization because nothing happened to me personally. You definitely don't condone the things that were happening around, and the justice will get served there. But my experience were always good. I was always embracing the fans. They embraced me. I'm happy to have a team that embraced me and gave me a shot. So that's why I'm tied to the Commanders. I'm tied to that Washington organization, and even though I spent some time with a few other teams.
Yeah, you did make the rounds after your stop in Washington. The former wide receiver Anthony Armstrong with us from the Commanders. All right, so they win last week. It was not a great start, but Wentz throws for 4 touchdowns. They come back to beat the Jaguars. How surprised were you that they showed some life this past weekend?
I can honestly say I'm very pleasantly surprised with all of it. Coming out of the preseason, you don't know what you're going to get. Everything's vanilla, and nobody shows their hand. But finally watching that tape and seeing the way that Scott Turner was dialing it up, getting the ball spread around to all of the different weapons, that really brought joy to my eyes. I was so happy to see that because that's what everybody's been asking for. That's what the Washington Commanders fans have been looking for. They want to see something exciting out of Curtis Samuel. They got him involved early. Antonio Gibson was running the ball hard. It took a while for Terry McLaurin to get going, but that's because the Jaguars respect that guy, and they wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to be a factor in that game. So I was super surprised, happy with how they played, and I'm stoked how they overcame that adversity late in the game.
You look at expectations for this football team. Like you said, Wentz comes in. It's weird, man. Like, where are you on Carson Wentz? What have you talked about on your show with him that, are fans, do they believe that this third stop is the right stop for him? Because last year in Indy, that was a complete dumpster fire at the end of the year.
Yeah, it ended tough over there in Indy, and that was the bad taste that was left in everybody's mouth whenever that trade happened. And I could say whenever the trade went down, I wasn't overall thrilled. But whenever it took a couple of days to kind of digest and step back and just let things settle, you realize that Washington wasn't going to get Russell Wilson. They weren't going to get Aaron Rodgers. None of the big name quarterbacks were going to go to Washington anyways. And at the time, that's the best thing that the team could have done. And if you being real about it, it's an upgrade at the position. Tanner Heinicke, he did a good job, but being able to have somebody like Carson Wentz, bigger arm, bigger body, more experience, that's an upgrade at that position. You could argue that Michigan has the second best quarterback in the division. Now things have changed with the injury down in Dallas, but Carson Wentz is a guy that I figure, hey, give him a chance to go out here, be in a new situation where he can prove himself. He doesn't have to have any pressure on his shoulders. And I think with Ron Rivera in this organization, it just seems to be that he doesn't have to force things right now. He can go out there and just play football. It's going to be good for him.
The Gibson thing is interesting because I looked at the numbers, and the Lions are going to have to key on him. This past week it was Jalen Hurts. They couldn't stop the RPO stuff. Now it looks like they're just putting Antonio Gibson all over the field. And that's a weapon. Yeah. That's a big-time weapon for that football team. Everybody talked about McLaurin maybe being the go-to guy, but talk about Gibson a little bit. Is he getting enough ink nationally?
AG, he's one of those guys he doesn't doesn't get a lot of press, and unfortunately, the most recent press had been about putting the ball on the ground. And with the whole Brian Robinson situation, it's very unfortunate, but it gives Antonio another opportunity, I should say, to step out here and prove himself. I mean, he did that on Sunday. He was running with anger. He was running with vision, and he got 21 touches. And on my show, I've been preaching that you got to look at Antonio Gibson as a guy who needs to touch the ball about 20 times a game in a multitude of ways. 7 catches, 14 rushes. He ended up with 130 total yards. That's a guy that you can use as a weapon. Scott Turner is using him at his disposal, and with Terry McLaurin taking a lot of attention from the defense, you're going to create some different holes, different zones. You put this playmaker in, and they're really making the most of this situation for him.
I want to talk to Anthony a little bit about Detroit and the Washington defense as well. We'll do that right after I tell you about BetOnline, your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Been telling you about betonline.net and betonline.ag. Either website is great. At betonline.net, you get all the latest football developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. And now we're into week 2. So you're going to want to look at the trends. This is what happened last week. Up-down theory this week, right? Lions are 2.5-point favorites, according to BetOnline, because they lost and Washington won. It's not like the Commanders are favorites right now. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action at BetOnline. They're the best. They got all the sports that you need and all the information, whether it's MLB, NFL, MMA, boxing, and golf as well. BetOnline is where the game starts.
I like those guys.
Our man Anthony Armstrong, Believe Podcast Network, Believe in Commanders, a podcast host, joining us now, the former Washington wide receiver. When he was there, it was the Redskins. So I'll say it again, even though maybe I'm upsetting some people.
Sorry,
Anthony, do you get how often do you mess that up?
For first starting doing the show, it was probably every show. I would kind of stumble around, but I've settled on Washington, and it's good. I can easily get in and out of Washington, but every now and again, I've never gotten confused for a Commander player, because I can definitely say that, shoot, I'm too old for that, man. I am too old for that.
I gotcha. In your day, you played with the likes of Donovan McNabb and others, and you look at the movement of quarterbacks now and how guys have to run. And last week we saw what Jalen Hurts did. What's your take on a guy like Jared Goff, who's going to be probably more of a pocket guy? Carson Wentz, I think, moves a little bit better. But when you look at Detroit and Goff and that offense, what do you think of 16 in the blue uniform?
I think Jared played pretty well. Just seeing how he's played in the past, he's been pretty conservative. He's going to take what the defense gives him, and he did that in this game. But the one thing that made the difference later on is that Detroit was able to run the ball so effectively. I mean, between DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, Philly had to respect that. And later on in the game, it left a lot of open zones for Jared to pick the defense apart. And throwing for close to 300 yards, just over 300 yards. Sure, he had an interception. That was a little miscommunication. And I think you see those things happen early on in the year. And he played pretty clean the rest of the game. So Jared Goff is a guy that, he's going to take what the defense gives you, but he did throw the ball downfield a little bit, so Washington has to be ready for that.
How big of a factor and a big of a break is it for Detroit that Chase Young is not going to be out there this week? And I know you guys lost some other defensive linemen this past weekend as well.
That's definitely a big thing to pay attention to. You're losing Fedarian Mathis. He's going on IR. So now the D-line is getting a little bit depleted, and you're going up against a very physical Detroit team. I mean, that O-line, big, mean, nasty, and Dan Campbell, that's the type of blueprint. That's what he wants to do with Detroit. He's going to run the ball. So they're going to get a lot of reps of just downhill running. They're going to have to be able to run those D tackles and the rest of that D-line in there. It would be great to have Chase Young available, because he's going to be able to put some pressure on Jared Goff. And if Washington can slow down that running game and put Goff in passing situations, that's going to be ideal. But if they're playing in front of the sticks and getting 4 or 5 yards to carry, it's going to be difficult.
Ron Rivera has always been a defensive-minded coach, going back to, of course, Carolina and taking them to the Super Bowl. But what do you see in that Commanders defense that you like so far?
I can say that I really liked how active the D-line was in that first game, being able to put pressure on Trevor Lawrence and that Jaguars offense. They made it difficult on him, and I think that same type of recipe needs to make its way over to this game in Detroit. And then I liked how the secondary played, especially when you're down a guy like Cam Curl. Derek Force was able to step in and have a wonderful day. I mean, he had an interception, huge hit on Travis Etienne, broke up a pass in the end zone. So it shows that there's some talent, there's some depth there. They're going to be challenged by what Detroit has, DJ Chark, Amon St. Brown, so those guys they're gonna have a good challenge. It'll be a good back and forth. I definitely think the O-line D-line matchup and those corners and y'all's receivers, that's going to be something to keep your eyes on.
It's a Tuesday. It's early. We got to see the injury reports. We got to see practice and everything else. What were the expectations? I mean, I guess you say, and maybe you could tell me as a former player, you look at this and go, if we could get a split, these first 2 weeks. I know that game was at home, although it was weird seeing Washington white uniforms at home. But how did you kind of view this early schedule for this Commander team? And are the expectations raised a little bit now that they won the first game, or were they supposed to win, beating Jacksonville at home?
You can't really disrespect the team and just that's going to be an easy dub. And that's one thing I did not want them to do. And I don't think that they underestimated Jacksonville. Jacksonville played a hell of a game. I mean, let's call it what it is. They came out and really fought. I mean, they were in the lead, right up to the end. So Jacksonville is an up-and-coming team. So that was a big win for Washington. I know that they needed that win, just going everything of just the rebrand, new name, new fight song, new quarterback. You can't show up and then lay an egg, so they needed that win. In my eyes, I think that Washington needs to jump out to a 2-0 season, right? They have to go in and find a way to get a win against Detroit. And looking back at the Detroit game versus Philly, I mean, you put up 35 points, you're down 14 in the fourth. Like you win a lot of ball games scoring 35 points. So this isn't going to be, a walk in the park for Washington at all. They're going to have to come in and play some good football, bring their lunch pail, because it's going to be a tough battle for sure.
When you played, any stories about playing against the Lions going back to your years in the league?
Yeah, so the time I played in Detroit, I think it was right around Halloween, and I had a few big catches, and at some point in the fourth quarter, we were going into a 2-minute drive, and they made a switch at quarterback, and I just happened to catch the stats. Somebody told me the stats, and they're like, hey, you got 96 yards. Or I might have looked up and saw it across the screen. I was like, oh, snap, I'm about to get my first 100-yard game. And every play that Rex called, I was looking at him like, can you just, hit me up right quick? Like, let me get 100, But I think I ended up with like 96 yards and like 5 catches. I think y'all got the dub that day. So y'all ruined my Halloween, but that was my experience up there in Detroit.
Rex Grossman, that's Super Bowl quarterback, not a winner, but he played in a Super. People can say all they want about Rex Grossman. He was in a Super Bowl once. So
yeah, he was there, man.
Yeah, he was with that juggernaut Bears team in the rain against the Colts. I'll never forget it. So yes, Anthony, was a lot of fun, man. Thanks so much.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for having me.
Believe Podcast Network, Anthony Armstrong. Follow him on Twitter at Mr. Armstrong13. Follow him all week as the Commanders, Anthony's Commanders, get ready to face the Lions. This is a Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions. Thanks for watching and listening.